One of the things that I find fascinating about League Two this season is probably the gap between League Two's promotion. There's no gap between League Two's promotion race and playoff scramble, because I look at the top half, other than Walsall, I think there's a really narrow gap in quality between the teams. And I think what that means is that maybe it's going to be very difficult in the second half of the season for teams to put a real run together, because every other week I think everyone's going to have a really tough game on their hands, and therefore there's a possibility that nobody actually puts together a serious run of form, and we might actually be looking at a relatively low points total, certainly for a top three finish, and maybe even for the playoffs as well. So in some ways it's a bad thing for promotion contenders in League Two, in the sense that there's more teams to compete with. On the other hand, it's probably a good thing, because those good teams are all taking points off one another. But I'm really curious to see what happens. And last week we spoke about the automatic promotion race. A little bit difficult to distinguish that, isn't it, from the playoff scramble in League Two? Because, for instance, you've got Bradford City, who are currently outside the playoffs at the moment in eighth. Well, they're only 3 points off Port Vale in third, and have a game in hand on them. So working out where different teams are at is a real challenge. But this evening, what we're doing is looking at outsiders for a top seven finish. Teams that, if there's teams in that current top eight or so that drop points as a result of the sort of congested top half of the table, might be able to sneak in there. So Grimsby Town making serious progress under David Artell. Chesterfield as a club certainly on the up under Paul Cook. Fleetwood Town, a bit of a signs of a revival there, inspired by Pete Wild. Of course, Bromley, newly promoted like Chesterfield from the National League playoffs, but with lower expectations. But could the spirit that they've got under Andy Woodman, combined with the goal scoring nice of Michael Cheek, see them into the top seven? And of course, there's MK Dons under Scott Lindsay, who aren't in good form at the moment, but they've certainly done their best to arrest that slight slide down the table with some impactful on paper January business, with the likes of Dan Crowley, poached from Notts County. So with all that in mind, who's likeliest to make a dart for the playoffs going into the last 20 games or so of the season? That's what we're going to be discussing on this League Two podcast. Yes, welcome along to EFL Debate. Get subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. That would help us out a lot. For now, I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host for the evening, Jack Kershaw of JK Analysis 7 on Twitter. Jack, thanks so much for joining us. Good evening. I wanted to ask you about the big picture at the moment, and is it? Do you agree with me? Do you think that the lines are a little bit blurred in League Two between the automatic promotion race and the playoff scramble?
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, you spoke about the teams that are obviously 9th to 13th, and then you saw what Doncaster did last season. Maybe we could expect someone in the bottom half who's not likely to get in the playoffs, but all you need to do is string a couple of results together in this league, and you're shooting up. And it is really tight, because everyone said it. Anyone could beat anyone in this division, and what it's going to take is just a club to get some real form together and just take momentum. That's how Salford have got into the playoffs now, and it is tight, and I think it will remain tight too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I see an equivalent of Doncaster of last season, or even if you go back into previous campaigns where Bristol Rovers and Bolton won automatic promotion from a very low point, sort of midway through the campaign. And the reason being is because I feel like it's a bit of a split league, in the sense that you've got MK Dons in 12th, who the quality of player that they've got, I would think that they should be in the top seven, based on individual quality alone, and obviously got a manager now in Scott Lindsay, who won promotion from the level before. Whereas you look at teams sort of towards the top of the bottom half, sides like Cheltenham Town, for instance, with respect, they're probably not nowhere near as good a squad on paper as maybe what MK Dons have got. So for me, I'm not sure I see there being room for a late runner from inside the bottom half. I think that your top seven is probably going to be made of teams that are in the top half at the moment.
Yeah, I think um, because obviously Doncaster they had three really good loans in January,
Mm.
and I sort of can't see that in the bottom picture. Obviously, people saying that Carlisle improved, but no chance they're even getting top half this season.
Yeah,
So, and then Swindon under Holloway, I don't think they're going to shoot up. I think that they're going to remain in the bottom half. Colchester and Danny Cowley still yet to really get going. Too many draws in there for them. Harrogate just going to be Harrogate really. Just sort of get near 15th or 17th, and obviously Barrow under the new manager.
Andy Wing.
Yes, I think probably take time for him to adapt, and yeah, I can't see really anyone from the bottom half looking at it. I know that obviously Fleetwood are in there, but we're 9 points off the playoffs with a few games in hand, and then
Mm.
you've got Harrogate who played 27 and 26, and all of a sudden games will be running out for sides down the bottom to try and get on that sort of run.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about Fleetwood then, because your victory over MK Dons in midweek certainly did give you a bit more of a sniff of the playoffs, despite being in that bottom half in 13th. How would you kind of sum up the impact that Pete Wild has made on the tournament?
I think so far what we've seen of Pete Wild, it's sort of what Charlie Adam couldn't do, and that sort of maybe in-game changes for Charlie Adam was more like for like. There was one game where he changed to a front three, and that was against Accrington, and we didn't see it really anymore. And then I think also with the adaptability that Wild's had, first two games he sat out in his 5-3-2, and
Mm,
then he had the 2 week break because we had two postponements, and then he's now had two back-to-back wins with a 4-2-3-1. So
mm,
you've had that sort of flexibility there already, and just going back to the start of the season, we probably would have let more than one goal slip last night against MK Dons, which we didn't. We dug in, but
mm,
I mean, although MK didn't really test us as much, they only had 4 shots with how much they dominated the ball. But it's good to see that at times we will press, but it's not going to be a case where we're going to press for 90 minutes because obviously it's not sustainable. We will
mm,
sit behind the ball, but I think we have got a very good set of lads who can really grind results out because I think there's more physical bodies on the pitch than sort of it was more 1v1s where either Ryan Broom was right wing back, Fiends
mm,
Patterson was left wing back. They were either getting out muscled or sort of lack of concentration, and really they're not sort of players that you'd want in them defensive positions.
mm,
So it's clear to see that Wild is in the team, even though we've got a small squad. He
mm.
wants to play to the team strength and not, put teams out of position because he said in his interview that's just putting your team at a disadvantage already.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that strikes me as a new thing about a Pete Wild side, which might not be true, but certainly strikes me, is this willingness from the goalkeeper to be a little bit patient in picking the passes. Because there was one highlight that led to the Matty Virtue 1-on-1 in the first half, Jack, in midweek, where there was one in 10 seconds before that, Jay Lynch had the ball and it didn't look like he had loads of intent to go anywhere with it. And then all of a sudden, it was like he quickly changed tack and then went into those forward areas. And within 10 seconds, Matty Virtue was through on goal. And I think Pete Wildside previously, I think Jay Lynch would have got the ball forward straight away. And I just wonder if it's a new thing that Pete Wild might have learned, that actually, if you sort of lull opposing teams into a false sense of security whereby they think the goalkeeper's going to take their time and they've got nothing to worry about, and then all of a sudden there's a quick change of speed and tempo, and it's right into the middle of the pitch, and the team's open. I think you can catch opponents off guard like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think because Wild did that at Barrow, he more or less had a target man, especially with Emil Aqua. I think with Ronan Coughlin, you're not going to get that sort of aerial presence. But I mean, I'm not too sure with the ball that it was actually meant for Coughlin behind. It was a bit of a weird one because the ball was kicked actually quite low, And then I think an MK player either went out the way of it, and suddenly we're in behind. I'm thinking, is Jay Lynch on for 2 assists for the season with a long ball? Because actually he's assist against Chesterfield, that was to actually kick it long when we're 1-0 down, and then Keane Harrett scores a screamer. But I think maybe when we have that target man, we might look to sort of play it quicker. But definitely, I get what you mean, because especially when MK played that high line, and I think Ronan Coughlin had a very, very good game, because every time he just stretched their back line and caused problems.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think with the way that Ronan Coughlin plays, there was one moment, probably again in the first half, where Patterson kind of cut it inside a little bit, and Coughlin went on the outside to try and create a chance for somebody. Might have been Bonds or Virtue getting on the end of it, and I think that shows that there's a willingness from Coughlin to be really selfless, like maybe Josh Gordon was for Pete Wild at Barrow, perhaps in his first season there. There's a real willingness to kind of run the channels and try and create chances as well as be the goal scorer. But then that means that you're going to need Brendan Wiradu, Elliot Bonds and Matty Virtue to all be willing to get into goal scoring areas, as well as Ryan Broom, even a Sean Rooney at the back stick, because if your strikers not in the goal scoring sort of classic number 9 position, you've got to make sure that other players are taking on that mantle.
Yeah, and even though Bonds has been sort of the sitter and Brendan sort of the box to box, we've seen Bonds actually be more forward with the ball, where sort of in the 3-5-2 with Charlie Adam, it was more the 3 centre halves stayed, and so did Bonds. He sat and had no attacking freedom whatsoever. But we've seen more sort of freedom going forward from Bonds, and Virtue, I think that's his best trait, to be a box crashing midfielder. He's not going to be the creative 10 in the 4-2-3-1. He's going to add sort of some defensive strength from the front to try and win the ball back. And he's not going to create much. He's just going to, if we do try and have a high turnover, which we did against Doncaster and he finished it, then, we've got a good ball striker there. And Coughlin, I'm glad you picked up on that, because Coughlin does that often. And also he likes to go off to the left and then sort of go onto the byline. Walsall away, he won a penalty from that because he's got really tight footwork, and although he's not the strongest, he don't get sort of pushed away so the player wins the ball back. He sort of sneaks his body in front to then put his body in front of the defender, so they've got no option either to bring him down or he's through on goal. So I think it's a tidy player, Coughlin, and I thought it was the slowest centre forward out of our 3 of Graydon and Harrott, but after seeing last night when we can see his willingness to run in behind, I thought he actually has got more pace than I actually credited him for. And in tight spaces, he kept the ball well, and he has got a good pass on him too in the final third, which I think we can a bit miss with Ryan Graydon. So I've been happy with Coughlin. I think my biggest issue is as much as he hits the target, he just needs to try and find the corners. Sometimes it's straight down the keeper's throat, and I think if you try to find the corners more, it'd be on double figures already.
Well, clearly doing a lot of work for the team, and hopefully that clinical edge in front of goal will come with time. Delighted to be joined now by Tom of Spy Rights Right on Chesterfield. Good evening, Tom. Thanks so much for joining us. We will be joined by Georgie Weaver in a few minutes' time. But Tom, I wanted to talk to you about Chesterfield because I think it was going into Christmas you were up as high as 5th, and now you're 7 points off the top 7. So it's clearly changed very quickly. I think you're, and obviously there's been some bad news with losing Dylan Markande to the recall. So I suppose your playoff chances are going to be determined by what happens in the next 10 days.
I think yes and no, because I think a lot of the reason why we've dropped off so much is just the sheer volume of injuries that we've had. I think at one point we had 14 first-team players out, and it's really hard to maintain any level of consistency when you've got that level of injuries, isn't it? So yeah, I think that's the main reason why we've dropped off so much. Obviously, teams can go through ups and downs over a season, but yeah, I think it's been inflated by that for sure. But we're starting to get players back now, and obviously, as you've alluded to as well, the transfer market's a thing, and we've brought in a few players already. So the squad's looking a bit more healthy now. I'm hoping that we can go on a bit of a run in the next few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that did stand out to me in the last game was Ryan Colclough on the left, linking up with Brandon Horton quite nicely. And I'm just wondering, now you've brought in Jack Sparks, who I think is probably going to bring a different level of quality and execution than, with respect to Horton, perhaps he might be able to provide. So is that something that excites you, the possibility of that link-up play between Colclough and Jack Sparks, who you've got on loan from Peterborough?
Yeah, very much so. I think all 4-4 systems, it lies overlapping fullbacks who've got a bit of technical ability to them. And to be fair on Horton, he's actually had a really good season. He was probably one who, in the summer, I wouldn't have been too disappointed if he'd been moved on. But with obviously the injury to Lewis Gordon, who came in, who it looks fantastic to be fair, but I think he's out until March now. So Horton has, in the last few weeks, done a really good job at left back. But yeah, like Sparks, who has got that higher league experience, and like you said, comes very highly rated, and will hopefully add a bit of quality there. Yeah, it is very exciting because Colclough, he's the kind of player that loves linking up with those first-time passes, the overlapping runs. He's always looking for them. And obviously, he cuts inside a lot as well, so that'll open up space for the likes of Sparks. So yeah, it's an exciting one.
Jack, from a neutral perspective, I don't know how much you've been able to watch of Chesterfield this season, but what's your sort of perspective on where they're at?
Well, I think, obviously Chesterfield have got the quality, and they've also got a great manager in Paul Cook, and just seems to be injury after injury for them. That's really been letting them down. And I think, obviously, like I said, losing Mark Andy is going to be really tough, but they've still got Dobra, who can sort of be in them spaces. They've signed now Peppel on loan. Obviously, he's been in the National League, but I think he might sort of bring a different profile to Madden and Grigg, and I think that's really what they need. And cause obviously Madden and Grigg, both of them, because Chesterfield start one striker, it's hard to obviously get them both in, but both of them sort of provide that goal-scoring threat. And now Peppel, I think he'll be able to sort of bring a different profile, and then hopefully, the men behind him, Colclough, we know that he can be a real threat at this level because of how he was at Wigan when they got promoted. I'm sure Cook was the manager then too. So I think Chesterfield, there is hope there, and it's just about maintaining the fitness of that squad, and also just keeping the players hopefully fit for the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Tom Naylor is having to start in central defence, or has done for much of this season, because you've not had any luck with injuries at the back. But I'm just wondering, I also feel like you're missing maybe that destructive presence in midfield, and I'm wondering if, one thing you might want to recruit for is a really athletic, tenacious midfielder who can break things up and give you that sort of solid platform, because you've not kept, if I think 6 of the current top 7, they've kept a double-figured number of clean sheets, whereas Chesterfield, I think it's about 7 clean sheets, or maybe 6 that you've kept, which isn't really enough. And I'm just wondering whether you've missed that kind of tenacious presence in front of the defence.
I think so. I think it's spot on that Tom Naylor could be that kind of presence if he was allowed to play in midfield. Obviously, he's getting on a bit in years. I mean, he's still got legs in him, hasn't he? But he's 33, 34. So I would quite like to see a sort of young up and coming defensive midfielder brought in, like you say, to screen the defence a bit more. But I think obviously in recent days we've signed Janoy Danasian and Kyle McFadzean's just signed today to go into defence. So I'm hoping that allows us to move Naylor back up to his more natural sort of holding midfield position. Because when he's on it in front of the defence, he's a really, really solid player, and he's one who's confident stepping up with the ball and driving up the pitch as well. So he's got a bit of everything, to be honest.
So where else do you think Chesterfield are going to need to recruit? Because you've already made 2 or 3 additions, I think, so far. So, are there any other areas where you think you're going to need strengthening in light of some of those injuries?
Yeah, I think, obviously, as you've alluded to, Dylan Markande is going to be quite a big loss in that attacking mid three. And obviously, it's pretty widely assumed James Berry's going to be moving on in the next few days. I've heard he's had a bid accepted from Wycombe.
That's a big leap for him, actually, just on that, Tom, isn't it? Because it's not like he starred particularly in the National League season, and he had a great start to the season, but you could argue even in League Two, his form has been up and down. So to think that this is somebody ready to go for a club that could be in the Championship next season, that feels like a bit of a stretch, doesn't it?
Yeah, don't get me wrong, I like Berry, and he's got a lot of talent, but he's not consistent yet. And I do think it's an interesting one from Wycombe. I wonder if they're signing him as a future prospect and then they're going to loan him back out to a League Two team or whatever. But I think it is a little bit of a punt on him at this stage. And I'm not saying that to disrespect Berry, because I do really like him and he's come up with some great moments for us this year. But yeah, I agree. I'm not sure about the consistency there with him. But obviously, if we lose him and we've lost Markande, we're definitely going to need a winger or two, I would say, in this transfer window. But it's just who's available, isn't it? So, I mean, you look at the team we've got now. We've got Colclough, like you said. Mandeville can play out wide and do a good job of it. Dobra can play on either wing or in the number 10. I'm pretty sure even Bailey Hobson could do a job out wide if you wanted him to. So we've got options, but they're not quite the quality options of Markande. And obviously Berry has been off the bench at the times this season. So, yeah, I'd like to see another attacking midfielder brought in.
Is there a feeling, Tom, from what you've seen in the first half of this season, that although, Chesterfield have got some very good players who would look right at home in League One, there's also a feeling that the squad's maybe, even taking into account the injuries, which I know has a massive impact, that the squad, if we're thinking about Chesterfield as a prospective League One club, that maybe you're just a year short of that sort of level and maybe could do with a year to grow a bit more next season, as opposed to going up straight away and maybe needing a bit more surgery.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we are a side in transition, aren't we? We've just come out of non-league after a long time, so we've still got some players who've been at the club throughout our non-league era, and some of them have stepped up, some of them maybe haven't to the same level as you would expect, and we're going to need a bit more of a clear out in the summer. A few players who probably aren't really going to get much first team action. I won't name any names, but there's probably a few that I would move on in the summer. And the thing is, though, with Paul Cook, I don't worry about the recruitment. If you give him the budget, he will bring in some quality players. And we've got promoted from this league before under him, and I think it's a matter of when, not if. I think if we don't do it this year, which we could do it this year, I wouldn't be that disappointed if we didn't, though, because it gives us another summer to then build, and I would back Paul Cook to do that.
Absolutely. Jack, which players for Chesterfield have kind of really stood out for you from a neutral perspective?
Obviously, Markande when he was there, but I think Tom Naylor, just because his versatility and he'd been put in centre half where really you want him in the midfield, but he's still done a job. He's contributed to goals and assists, and I also think on his A game. I'm trying to think of his net. Ollie Banks, sorry. I think his quality can really hurt teams, and I think I do like Berry, but I think to go to a team of Wycombe where they've got to where they are because they work hard, is he going to work as hard? Because when I've seen Berry, I think some of his limitation is obviously the consistency, but also the work ethic off the ball. I don't think he's that kind of player that maybe Wycombe want, but maybe with the new manager that might not be an issue with the wingers, because obviously he's not going to be a Matt Bloomfield side anymore. But I think because we've seen many players out like Madden, Greg, I really like Paddy Madden. We've not seen the best of Chesterfield yet, and I agree that it could be the best. To not get promoted this season, sell sort of the deadwood and maybe players that aren't sort of lead to promotion worthy yet, and obviously rebuild in the summer.
So do you think Chesterfield finished top 7 yet, Tom?
I think we can. Whether we will or not depends on injury luck. If we can get all of our players back and sort of go on a bit of a run in this last period of the season, then yeah, I don't see why not. You know what this league's like. You win a few games and all of a sudden you're third. look at Salford the other week.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's more than possible. I think we've got the quality to do it. It's just whether or not we get the consistency.
Well, hopefully you can find that. Tom, thanks so much for joining us, and best luck for the Spirates for the rest of the season.
Cheers for having me. Thanks.
Cheers. Delighted to be joined now by Georgie Weaver, our Barrow representative. Good evening, Georgie. Thanks so much for joining us. Just wondering how you feel. This is obviously a playoff chat. Do you feel Bromley are in a position to challenge for the playoffs, or are you more having your eye on sort of consolidation?
I think for me, I think still sort of consolidation, and I think most Bromley fans, especially those who've been watching for quite a while, will still always say we just want to be safe. And obviously with the run we went on sort of at the end of 2024, we've almost done that. Obviously it's not a few more wins and you feel like you'll be fine. So I think for me, still feeling like consolidation, but with where we are and where we've got ourselves in the table, I think it is something that is possible. And I think people are starting to think maybe, again, like we're just saying with Chesterfield, you put together a bit of a run and you could, all of a sudden you're up there. So yeah, I think we're currently 8 points off playoffs. So I think it's something that is possible, but I'm sort of still keeping my eye on just sort of, mid-table or, top half would still be, an incredible season for us. Staying up officially, is really what we want, but anything more than that would be incredible.
Certainly would. Jack, from an outside sort of neutral perspective, what's sort of stood out to you about Bromley this year?
I think just the relentless of when the counter-attack, especially when they play Fleetwood. Danny Imre on the right-hand side. I didn't actually realise how quick he was until he went on the right-hand side. I'm thinking, wow. Even Michael Cheek, I thought for a 33-year-old target man, he's actually not nippy, but I expect him to be really sort of slow, but he weren't. I think for Bromley, I think him and Whiteley, especially at the start, they were really linking up really nicely. Whiteley with sort of the creativity, and then Cheeky just bagged everything that's been in front of him this season. But Woodman, again, I think the few guys that have this sort of thing in common this season, be really structured defensively, which obviously they were in the National League, and then try and counter attack and be really competitive and physical, which obviously Bromley have done. They've got really good draws this season, and for me, they deserve to be where they are.
Georgie, it's interesting to hear Jack mention Danny Imre there, because he's certainly been a standout with his ball carrying ability from the right hand side. Is there a bit of a worry that we've seen Wycombe Wanderers linked with a permanent move for Danny Imre, which would mean ending his loan from Crystal Palace? So have some fans sort of a little bit apprehensive about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's there's been various rumours sort of in the past few weeks, and obviously Wycombe being the main one. And I think it is a bit of it is something that people are slightly concerned about, because he's been our standout player. Obviously, like you were saying, Michael Cheek as well, obviously, but sort of as a new player coming in the summer. And I didn't really know much about him. A lot of people did because of the sort of Palace connection. But yeah, his pace, nearly every ball that he puts into the box is a good ball, whether it results in something or not. So I think that is a bit of a concern that we've lost games and he's still been sort of man of the match. So I think that's something we're sort of keeping an eye on. Hope Wycombe do seem to be signing a lot of players. Maybe that it won't end up happening. So and I think if it doesn't, I think hopefully Palace will allow him to stay on loan. Ultimately, for him, he probably should be kind of trying himself in League One, to be honest. But from a personal Bromley perspective, we'd really like to hang on to him for as long as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Who have been the other players outside? Because I think Danny Imre and Michael Cheek are the obvious ones, because they've really hit the big numbers this season. Any others that maybe have flown under the radar for the Ravens? I
think for us, so Jude Arthurs, who's he's been at Bromley quite a few years now. We sort of signed him from Gillingham, where he's at their academy, and I think he's always been a bit of a fan favourite. But for me, especially as the season's gone on, he's just consistently got better. And he's chipped in with goals, which at the start of the season, as great as it is that Michael Cheek's scoring loads, we were sort of struggling with other members of the team, scoring. So I think, Jude's got a few goals, and just technically in that midfield has been, he's always been good, but I think he's really improved. So I think he's flying under the radar a little bit. And Ben Thompson as well in the midfield. It was really great. We've got him on a permanent signing now from Stevenage, I believe. So I'd say that sort of in our midfield been, other than, Michael Cheek and Danny Imro.
Yeah, I think getting Ben Thompson permanently was a fantastic signing. I think he could still be a real asset for you, because I've seen him produce an outstanding performance with my own eyes in the Championship level against my own team, Birmingham, for Millwall, and I'm sure he's still got some of that quality. So I'm sure Bromley can be a place for him to rebuild his career.
Yeah.
So how are you feeling then? Do you think Bromley could possibly crack the top 10 this season? Do you think he can stay in the playoff equation? What's the feeling?
I think it'd be quite nice if if you're sort of in that top 10, and then there's, a chance sort of, towards the end of the season, and then obviously be officially safe. And I think just having that chance of, could we, couldn't we? So I think it's possible. We've got quite a tough run coming up. We had Crewe away at this, a couple of weeks ago and lost that, but that was pre FA Cup third round, and then we lost the game after the FA Cup third round. So a couple of not so great results. We've got Notts County away coming up and Chesterfield away, and obviously with us, any game you look at in League Two seems difficult, but it does feel like quite a tough run throughout January and February. So I think if we get through that and you're still sort of top half, maybe I think there's still a possibility. But you look at the teams above us and sort of around us, and you do just think they've probably got a bit more just to creep themselves up the table. And even those teams already in the playoffs, you do think, you look at them and you can't see many of them sort of slipping down. So it'll be tough if it is doable.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, Georgie, we wish you well for the rest of the season.
Thank
and
you.
Look forward to catching up soon.
Thank you. See you later.
So, Jack, I wanted to move on to MK Dons, because we had a video from Jacob Beecher, who's an MK Dons fan from the EFL Insider. Here's what he had to say.
Are MK Dons dark horses for the promotion push in EFL League 2? That's what I'm here to talk to you about today. Many people have written MK Dons off this season. One of the main reasons is our adaptability. Adaptability means we can pinpoint weaknesses in other teams' systems and attack those to make chances and potentially score goals. For me, adaptability is one of the main reasons that wins you titles. Unfortunately for MK Dons, Scott Lindsay has not implemented this. He does not like to change his system. He likes to stay in his negative possession-based football. Another reason I think MK Dons are really struggling is our defensive mindset. With this negative football, we don't tend to move the ball much up further. However, we play an extremely high line. When MK Dons lose the ball, we are then caught out on a counter-attack, and many teams with pacey wingers then can bomb down the lines and catch out our centre-backs, who are not the fastest. This has then been changed in the January transfer window, when MK Dons signed Jay Williams from Crawley, an ex-Scott Lindsay player, a brilliant warrior in the midfield, and can play centre-back. He can do anything to win that ball back for a team. Another player, although attacking-minded, is Dan Crowley. Dan Crowley is phenomenal. He's a magician and can do things with a ball that nobody else can ever do. Another brilliant player, but on loan, is Newcastle's Joe White, a brilliant player who did very well in his first start. That's all from me. Hope you all have a good day.
Yeah, thanks so much to Jacob Beecher for his contributions, and you can obviously go and check out his stuff at the EFL Insider. I have to say, though, I think it was very harsh on Scott Lindsay. I think when you look at his achievements with Crawley and the kind of football that he got them playing, I'm pretty confident that eventually he'll get MK Dons sticking, even if it hasn't, even though it's taken him a bit longer than he might have liked. And I think that to call it negative football, slightly, I think it's harsh. I understand where he's coming from in terms of maybe they can be focused on looking after the ball rather than going forward at any opportunity. But I think that's more a question of style than attacking or defensive, because as Jacob also mentioned, there's a high defensive line. that MK Dons play, which again they can sometimes be caught out with. But I think to say it's negative is harsh. I think clearly recent results haven't been at the level that MK Dons fans would have wanted. So I think it's important that they start to put some form together soon. But I'm really excited to see how the likes of Tommy O'Reilly and Dan Crowley can bring some fresh quality to those attacking positions. Because as you'd have seen in midweek, Jack, Tommy O'Reilly came off the bench to produce a lovely little strike at Highbury.
Yeah, I think if MK were actually going to score, it would have come from some good individual quality, and obviously O'Reilly, if he does that, then maybe Lindsay might try to tweak the team sheet. And we said it last week that a box midfield of Williams, Kelly, Crowley, and Gilby, it's sort of got it all in that box midfield. And I think with Lindsay, obviously he got the promotion. Crawley shouldn't have even been up there at the start of the season. They were tipped to go down. We know that Lindsay can do things with his possession-based side, and I think also, even though MK are brilliant players for the possession-based style, it's not his squad. So I think a few people have sort of forgotten that Lindsay hasn't been here from the start of the season. He has come in, and I think they were on a run where they were scoring 2 or 3 in each game, I think from October to November. But when I was looking at some the stats and the shots, it was normally only like a range of 5 to 9 shots in the game, but they had a good ratio of shots to shots on target. And I think last night they only had 4 shots and they had 73% possession. And it just felt so sideways, but you could see the way that they tried to get into the final third. They had a lot of fluidity. I thought Joe White was excellent because he was everywhere.
Even at left wing back, Jack.
Yeah, because at times we weren't even left wing back. There was so much rotations in the squad that Joe White had the freedom to go anywhere. And
sorry, would you just explain? That sounds really interesting because I've watched the extended highlights, but I've not had the chance to watch the full game. So how would you kind of, if you can, sort of unpack how Joe White sort of was able to play in sort of multiple different positions and had that freedom, even if maybe the team sheet might have said that he was left wing back?
So out of possession he was left wing back, but I think in possession when he could sort of roam and try to maybe even go out on the right, even though Crowley was more positioned there. But I thought he had the freedom, and then it was sort of Kane Thompson-Sommers that was sort of holding that position on the left. Because I think MK's definitely, they tried to get in the main 1v1 versus Potter. It didn't work because every diagonal ball Potter near enough got to, and then they would try to work the give and goes between Crowley and the main. It worked sometimes and sometimes it didn't. I think the left-hand side, they didn't really attack them all because of White obviously having that freedom, and then Thompson-Sommers, you wouldn't have thought, you won't really want him.
And also, it's not like Sam Sherring is a super attacking outside roaming centre half who's going to fly forward. So, yeah, maybe. Yeah. I also thought, actually, just on that, Jack, you had Luke Offord as a right centre half, and I thought might be one of the first chances Fleetwood had. I thought, for me, you want your middle centre back to be very aggressive without the ball, and you want your wide centre halves to actually be more about waiting for those 1v1. So you want them to be really athletic and to almost have the confidence to say, "Come on, then, if you're going to go." Yeah. 1v1, I've got the pace and strength to deal with it. And I don't think Luke Offord is quite like that. I think he's more of a really aggressive centre half. He'll go and step in, and I think that's better for a middle centre half where you've got the cover of 2 centre backs who are a bit more sort of restrained than as an outside centre half where if he goes, all of a sudden, Nemain's really high up the pitch and there's not as much cover behind him. So I think that's a potential problem. So a couple of things maybe for Scott Lindsay to look to maybe rejig, perhaps.
Yeah, and obviously Luke Offord has the ability to step into midfield. So obviously that's a trait that he can have there. And obviously, I think they missed Lawrence Maguire, who was obviously left centre half. Yeah. And and I thought at Crawley he was really creative. So maybe not having Maguire in that left centre half spot maybe damaged them. And it was interesting to see actually that Joe Tomlinson didn't start, which I thought maybe he would do, but obviously he's trying to sort different things out, and he's just been put in the job about a few months back, and I think he's just trying to find those ideas. But I thought just MK, they were just, I think, playing too much side to side, and there was a lot of trying to play the give and goes. Crowley had dropped deep and played the great long ball. I mean, there was one where Scott Hogan was through, and
yes, I saw that. Do you know what, though? I thought James Bolton showed Scott Hogan far too much respect. I mean, I like James Bolton in the sense that he doesn't give anything away because he always holds his position. He's a very, what I'd call, sensible defender, despite being a fullback by trade. He's somebody who won't lose many individual duels because he only competes for the ones he's absolutely certain that he's going to win. But also it means that you're thinking, oh, come on, it's Scott Hogan. He's a good finisher, but he's not gonna take you on for pace or strength or anything, so you can probably just go and close him down. So yeah, I'm wondering whether you feel like you might need another centre half on a slightly bit of a tangent there.
Yeah, because when I was thinking there, it was sort of Finley Potter's deflection that took the shot away, and you're thinking, come on, Bolton, try and really go for him. I think Bolton sort of suffered against target men this season, which
that doesn't surprise me. He's not particularly physical. He's not very tall. No. He's a fullback by trade. He's not going to do well against target men, is he?
No, and I think with Harrison Holgate, I think he was more aerially sound, and also I think Bolton's been quite slow this season. And also, if we're playing that 4. And maybe if he's in the right centre half position sometimes, and obviously Rooney's going forward, he'll need to try and defend that channel if he's on the right hand side. But
could Rooney play as a centre half, Jack?
Yeah, from when Charlie Adam came in, he was right centre half. Rooney, I thought it was more disciplined. He didn't get many bookings, which obviously he does at right wing back. And I thought he was strong in the air, but I think for us, we can't play him at centre half. If needs be, we can, but I think his final third output, I think we would really miss.
Right, okay, interesting. Well, very interesting. So certainly I think it's just going back to MK Dons, really important that they find those right tweaks to sort of rejig their system a little bit, because if they can hit their best possible play to their maximum potential, they can get into the top 7. There is a bit of a jump for them at the moment, but they do have the quality to make up that gap and do something similar to what Doncaster did last year. But also at the same time, they have got to find those solutions reasonably quickly, I think it's fair to say. Delighted to be joined now by Adam from A View from the Findus podcast on Grimsby Town. Good evening, Adam. How are you, mate?
I'm very well, Gab. I just heard that talk about Bolton there. I'd sort of drifted off for a second, heard the talk about Bolton and thought, have I logged on to the right one here? We're talking League One. What's going on? Suddenly realised we're talking Fleetwood and the defender Bolton at Fleetwood. Yeah, slight panic there from me. I thought, quickly log off.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Adam, 1-1 draw with Chesterfield at the weekend, but I really liked some of the football that you played when I saw the extended highlights, and the one that really stood out to me was Denver Hume. He's bringing a bit of the samba flair to Cleethorpes, isn't he?
He certainly is. I mean, yeah, what a beautiful Maradona role almost, wasn't it there? I mean, there's a reason he's got so many assists this season. Denver Hume, he's so creative. A lot of the great attacking play starts with Denver Hume, or at least chances are created by him. So yeah, he did really well. Actually, at the game, I was cursing Svan Thorsen for missing the chance. Having seen it back on the highlights, I feel I was a bit harsh. Sometimes when you're in the ground, you don't quite get the same perspective. It looked a better chance from my seat than it did on the highlights. He was closed down quickly. There was a couple of players on him. It was a tougher chance. But yeah, Denver Hume again, outstanding, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly becoming one of the best fullbacks in the division. Jack, who else has, from an outside perspective, who else has impressed you for Grimsby this season? Obviously, Evan Corey and George McEachran in midfield are certainly lighting things up. What do you think from a neutral perspective?
I think recently Jaden Luke has been pretty good on that right-hand side. I thought that because I think he's only featured only about 10 12 games this season. I thought, wow, I saw him because on FOTMob he had quite high ratings against some side, and I was just wanted to watch the extended highlights to see sort of who he was and how he plays, and obviously I thought he pinned his man really well. He's got that sort of precise pass in the final third, and I was really impressed. And obviously Jordan Davis hasn't had the game time because of his injury, but I think when he's come back, he's added that goal scoring threat, which we knew he could do because of his non-league stint at Wrexham. But obviously Denver Hume, especially. I mean, I think sometimes he can even come inside from the left, and I didn't expect him to be up there, to be honest, at the start of the season with the assists. Obviously, he's leading it this season. I just think, I think with League Two this season, it's been not a lot of reliance on the wing backs getting the output from sort of defensive position, but I think it's really key that you have two attacking wing backs but also he's comfortable in playing a 4 because obviously Artel's been flexible this season. We're playing a 4 and a 5, and I've really thought that's been interesting, and with some games it's worked a treat.
Yeah, certainly can't disagree with any of that. I mean, Jaden Luca at times has looked excellent. When we signed him, he was actually injured, so hence why he didn't play much at the start of the season. But yeah, he's coming back in now, and he looks a real player. 19, I think. I'm pretty certain. Yeah, 19 years of age. You feel that he's definitely going to play higher up the pyramid because he's just got something about him. And even, which occasionally you see at this level, you sometimes feel he plays a pass or makes a run and you think the other player's just not quite on that same wavelength. It's like, I can see exactly what he was trying there, but that whoever it was wasn't on the toes or wasn't quite. So, yeah, I think he's got a big future in the game ahead of him, definitely.
So, Adam, on the one hand, I'm sure there's a real excitement now at Blundell Park for what David Artell is building and what the sort of mid to long-term future holds. On the other hand, is there also a feeling that this, what can be achieved this season, because you are still very much in the mix for the playoffs?
Oh, very much, yeah. I mean, the biggest compliment I can give the club at the moment, the whole ownership and Artell, is that we are progressing in the right direction, obviously. I mean, all you have to do is look at the league table 12 months ago compared to now to see that. We're currently 4 points off the playoffs. This time last year, we were probably 4 points off the relegation zone, somewhere thereabouts. So, yeah, we're certainly improving. And, yeah, of course, we've still got a chance. There's a lot of inconsistency in this league. Us being the absolute epitome of that, I feel. We're inconsistent with a capital I. And that's just Blundell Park's pitch at the moment. I mean, the consistency of that we won't get into. But yeah, we've certainly got a chance as long as we can stay around that playoff picture. It's the old classic, isn't it? If you can go into the last 10 games and you're only a few points off the playoffs, you've got a chance of putting a run together and getting there. And actually, in our next 8 games, we're only playing Doncaster away. Tickets out in the morning, any Grimsby fans that are listening to this. But only Doncaster were playing that are above us in the next 8 matches. We've got a lot.
I thought you were saying it's only Doncaster that you're playing at all. That would be an absolute nightmare for Grimsby fans.
It would, yeah.
You don't like playing them.
Yeah, I mean, foolishly, I will be buying my ticket in the morning, but we never seem to get much there, do we? Or even if they come to us, we don't get much. But yeah, this next run of fixtures isn't too bad on paper. So yeah, as long as we can stay in touch, you never know. And obviously, you never know with the transfer window being open what the next 8 days, 9 days, whatever it is left brings.
Yeah, is there a feeling that there could be some moves in the offing at Blundell Park?
I'm sure there'll be something, Gab. I mean, it's been extremely quiet, in that we've done nothing. I mean, there's quiet and then there's silence. However, this time last year, if we'd done nothing, I would be genuinely worried. We didn't, thankfully. We brought in Curtis Thompson, Doug Tham, etc., and eventually retained our EFL status. But we're in that nice position at the moment where we don't need to panic buy. Worst case scenario, we slip to mid-table. We would have taken that at the start of the season. So we are in that lovely position. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a football fan. I'm checking X, as it's now called, 2 or 3 or more times a day to see if there's any news, anything happening, almost like an archaeologist digging around looking for that bit of information, that potential signing. And yeah, I mean, I'm desperate for us to do something, but at the same time, I understand why we're in no rush. There is no urgency. There's no point in us panic buying, almost like some teams in the division seem to be. Carlisle, I'll throw out there. I mean, don't get me wrong, I feel some of their signings are good, shrewd signings, but it does feel a bit like, how many should we throw at it, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I'm quite relaxed about the whole situation, Gab. I'm sure we'll bring a couple in the next week or so, but it certainly feels like we've taken our time to get the right men in.
Yeah, I agree. I've got to pay tribute to the work that Joe Hutchinson has done as head recruitment. And I also feel like there's a squad that's sort of growing nicely in terms of there's lots of players that other clubs will want, where 12 months ago you were talking about players that you'd be looking to offload, but now you've got Denver Hume, you've got Evan Curry, you've got Cameron McJanet, you've got George McEachran, Svan Thorson starting to come into a form after an inevitably quiet first 3 or 4 months of the season. It feels like you've got players now, even just Nabiku, who's only on loan, but there's players at Grimsby Town that have the potential to grow with the club and that other clubs higher up the pyramid might want. And I think that's a really nice position to be in.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, all those players you've listed there, and obviously part of your thinking with your comment, no doubt, is they're all early to mid-20s. So obviously there's value attached to players at that age that where there isn't necessarily if they're like myself, get a bit more of a maturer man. So yeah, we've signed wisely, haven't we? We're in a good position, and actually, with the transfer window being open, as fans, as I've alluded to, we're often desperate and for that next new shiny, exciting signing. However, sometimes retaining players or at least selling them at the right time can be just as good business, can't it? And keeping hold of players like Denver Hume until the end of the season could be just as important or even more important than bringing somebody in terms of our push for the playoffs. So yeah.
Absolutely. Talking at the other end of the age spectrum to yourself, Adam, Cam Gardner. What's the crack with it? He didn't make the matchday squad last time out. I don't know whether that's just because he's a youngster and he's going to take time, or is he injured at the moment, or are you expecting him to feature much between now and the end of the season?
There has been an injury. Although I think I've heard he's back training and fine.
Right, yeah.
More than anything, what's happened is we've had more players come back from injury, that's more senior players. So we're not having to rely so much. At the start of the season, I mean, we had just a huge amount of injuries at times. And we were having to not got a huge squad, like most League Two sides, having to fill the bench with some of those younger players. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Cam Gardner was just thrown on there because he's a younger player, because there's been times where he started with Cam Gardner, even over experienced pros like Danny Rose.
Sure.
And I think there's a big future in the game for Cam Gardner as well. I really do. But I think it's just that thing of the nice thing when you've got all those other players back, you can build him in gradually. You can pick and choose when you play him, when you put him on. So yeah, no, I'm sure we will see more of Cam this season. Although again, there's always potential if we bring in another striker option for him to go out on a short-term loan to the National League or potentially below. But I would have thought National League.
I think he's earned a National League loan now if he goes out. I think, if you're talking 12 months or whatever, 6 months, start of the season, say, I would have said maybe National League North. But I think at the moment, the way he's played, when he has featured, I think, I don't think he drops any lower than the National League right now. So I'm sure he'll get that opportunity. What was I going to say? Yeah, I think if I'm holding Grimsby to top 7 standards, which that's not to say that there's an expectation that Grimsby should finish there, because I'm mindful of how far you've come. But if I was to hold you to those standards, I think you probably need to draw more games rather than lose them, because at the moment it feels like you're going from a win to a defeat to a win to a defeat, and it's difficult to gain as much as that's great in terms of a points tally, and it shows you've made extra whatever the word is, I don't even know, I've forgotten. It made huge progress from last season, but also I think it's the fact that sort of losing every other game, it can destabilize the season. Whereas I actually think throwing the odd draw in there kind of keeps you in about the top 7 in a way that maybe losing every week can be a problem in that regard.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, prior to the Chesterfield game, I'd forgotten what a draw felt like. And actually, I ended up in the pub.
You thought it was something down on a piece of paper.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I ended up in going for a pint after the game, and there was Chesterfield fans in there, and it almost felt strange to be sharing the spoils with them and having a nice chat with them about their thoughts on the game. So yeah, there's certainly an argument to be had that we need to be turning, obviously, some of those defeats into draws. However, if we change the style, if we change the way we play a little bit to set up to be harder to beat, there's also the argument that we may well convert some of our wins into draws.
Sure, yeah.
And I suppose the problem with that is ever since we've gone for 3 points for a win, 1 for a draw, the margin's larger. So you're almost better going for it sometimes. And okay, you may occasionally bust, like we certainly can do in spectacular fashion still. We've seen this sometimes this season. Going and trying to win all your matches and winning some, losing some, drawing not many can actually be quite a successful way. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying to an extent, as long as it's converting those defeats into draws and not dragging some of those victories back and turning those into draws as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I look at Grimsby, Adam, and I think 2 or 3 players away from being a side that could, seriously challenge for promotion, whether that's this season or next. Is that a feeling that you would share as a fan base?
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, there's been plenty of matches this season. I mean, the Port Vale one fairly recently where we beat them 3-0 and it looked superb. And there's been matches where it's almost all come together and we look like a real side, and you think we could easily kick on and surprise everybody this season. But then we have a Bradford away to bring us back down to earth. What a cold, miserable afternoon that was. But yeah, it does feel like we're close. It does feel like we're building something. And often in matches, we're inconsistent still. We will put half an hour spells together where we look excellent, and then the match will switch and goes the other way. But yeah, I do feel like we are close. We don't need to. In the past, at times, we've had especially summer transfer windows, where it's been an absolute cavalcade of signings coming in one after another, because we've had to just rip the whole squad apart and try again. We're not in that position. We're tweaking now. So, yeah, 2 or 3 shrewd signings either this January or in the summer, ready for next season, and we could progress further and be a side sat in the playoffs or even challenging automatic, which seems so strange to be saying, Gab. It really does. In the Football League, I mean, we've done it so many times recently when we've dropped out the league,
Yeah.
but it just seems a long time since.
Yeah, I don't know when the last time was you were challenging for promotion in League Two. So it does feel like a long time.
I mean, when we very first came back up under Paul Hurst, that first half of the season, Omar Bogle was on absolute fire. I don't know how well you remember that, Gab. And, and we were around the playoffs. Obviously, sold him to Wigan in the January transfer window. And yeah, we dropped to mid-table, and then that was probably the last time.
Hurst left as well, didn't he? That season, went to Shrewsbury.
He did, yeah.
And then you got Marcus Bignett, and I was actually in the away end at Crewe that season, and
right, yeah,
and it was sort of I spoke to somebody afterwards who had said. I didn't actually see the thing with the fans, but I spoke to somebody afterwards and said he's just spoken to the fans.
Yeah.
And caused a bit of drama there. Adam, great to get your insight on Grimsby Town, and thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, not a problem. Lovely to meet you as well. And yeah, and I haven't said it to you yet, Gab, so Happy New Year, because we haven't had the pleasure to chat yet, have we?
It almost feels like it's past the
I was going to say, yeah. It's almost spring, isn't it? But yeah, belated Happy New Year. Great to see you all. Hopefully next time we speak, we've kicked on again. Take care.
Cheers, Adam. Appreciate it.
See you soon.
Jack, I wanted to kind of just reflect on the people we've heard from this evening on each of those clubs. So if we had to, let's take the points gap out of the equation. Let's rank these 5 teams in terms of likelihood of putting a run together. You've got Grimsby, you've got Chesterfield, you've got Bromley, MK Dons and Fleetwood. If you had to pick one out of those, who would you say is likeliest to put a run together that could get them into the top 7?
I think Chesterfield, due to them getting players back. Obviously, it's another question: will they stay fit? But I think with them, I don't know how long Shea Dunkley's out for, but they'll certainly get Greg and Madden back, and if they keep Berry, that's a bonus. I know they'll lose Mark Candy, but I think Paul Cook can drill it into them to really get the best out of them.
Okay, yeah, so you go with Chesterfield. There's part of me that thinks MK Dons with Crowley and O'Reilly, if they can find that sort of equilibrium that's proved a little bit elusive, that they might put a run together. But I can see why you'd go with Chesterfield. So certainly those two, and then Grimsby. I mean, listening to Adam there, seems to be a lot of optimism at Grimsby. Do you think that they could possibly string some form together?
Yeah, because I think compared to others, Grimsby haven't got maybe a star player. If you get what I mean, because obviously Bromley, they've got Danny Imray. Chesterfield, they've got a few high-profile players for this league. MK Don's got Crowley. I mean, Fleetwood, we've got Brendan Wiradu. And then you're thinking with Grimsby, they haven't got the star player of that maybe calibre, but looking at the bench against Chesterfield, that's pretty strong. You've got obviously Curtis Thompson coming back. You've got Barrington, who's been decent this season. Kieran Green, I think, has been one of their better players. Danny Rose, we know how many goals he can score, and also Vernon. So, yeah, I think Grimsby, even though they don't maybe have the sort of deluxe players that maybe some teams do, they've got really good depth in quality. And then if them players are brought in, I think Grimsby fans, if they're brought in on a match day, they're not going to really say, "Oh, why is he?" And they're going to be thankful that he's there, because ultimately they've got a lot of good players at League Two standard.
Certainly have. So for your team then, Fleetwood, Jack, I think we can probably agree that they're likelier maybe than Bromley to string that run of form together that might get them into the playoffs. Would you say they've got a better chance than either of MK Dons or Grimsby, or would you put those three ahead of Fleetwood in terms of likelihood?
It's hard because Pete Wild has promised us that we're going to go on a run. So I'm expecting us to go on a run now. And I feel, in comparison to other teams, our season's not got started because we've played the least amount of games. We've had so many postponements. And it feels like we haven't gone on that run yet. MK went on that run because when Lindsay first joined, like I said earlier, they were scoring 2 or 3 and they were winning a lot. And then Bromley, they went on the run before Crewe beat him. Grimsby haven't. I think they've been definitely one of the most inconsistent sides in the league. But I think Artell maybe knows it more than Pete Wild. So I think I'd rank it Chesterfield, Grimsby and Fleetwood. Just I know obviously the quality that Scott Lindsay has, but it's just whether that quality is going to perform to the level. And from just what I've seen, I don't think they have got that authority. And even in the striking department, I know Hendry scored a few last season for
Scott
Salford.
Hogan, though, Jack. I mean, Scott Hogan's got championship pedigree. He scored goals at that level, and not that long ago. It's not like this was years and years ago. Like a couple of years ago, he was sitting up top for my lot, Birmingham, in the championship. He's a real finisher, and if you can create a system which, when you think about it, they've got Aaron Nemain, who's an insane wing back in terms of attacking 1v1s and getting to the byline and crossing it. You've got Joe Tomlinson, who's a really technical wing back. You've got Dan Crowley, who's this brilliant playmaker and it has stunning vision. And you've got Tommy O'Reilly, who, as you've seen, can sort of spin away from people and create something out of nothing. Those 4 players can create for Scott Hogan. And then, so if they can find the right sort of balance and equilibrium in midfield, which has got a little bit off kilter, I think their ceiling is really high. And I think if they can raise their floor a little bit, I think MK Dons have what it takes to put a run together. Whereas I don't think Fleetwood or Grimsby have that same star quality where if it clicks, they're going to be amazing. I think that they're only ever going to be a sort of a 7 or 8 out of 10. Whereas I think MK Dons could, if it clicks, be a 9 or 10 out of 10. It's just that they've been more recently a 4 or 5 out of 10 because everything's been a bit off kilter. But I think a couple of tweaks and I think MK Dons could be very, very strong.
Yeah, definitely, because MK obviously the more dominant team than Fleetwood and Grimsby. I think we've got an innovative manager in Wild, where even in game he'll tweak stuff. He'll definitely do his homework. He confused Carl Robinson, an experienced manager, with his 4-2-3-1. Ian Robinson said that he tried 3 formations to try and crack us down in the game. And I just think we're sort of Wilds, not being bonkers, but trying to tweak things and trying to change things and just bringing a fresh face. I think it's reunited the players, and ultimately he's fitting to the players' sort of ability. And Grimsby definitely have I think if you're comparing, our depth is weak because I think Medley's going to be coming back maybe March. That'll be a big bonus because
if you can get into a decent position by then, I think Medley and possibly Bennett could be a really strong centre back pairing.
Yeah, and but also it just depends if in possession Medley wants to be that central centre back, because when we played that 4 at the back, Potter's sort of not had any attacking role, which is respectable because he's a centre half, and sure. I think that's where we need to recruit. I'm not expecting any signings to be coming in because I think the main position we're after is a target man, and everyone knows in January.
See, I would worry about bringing in a target man, because if I look at Pete Wild's sides when I've been more impressed with them, it's definitely been when they've had a striker that's really quick and mobile against the ball, and also is willing to make selfless runs and create space for other players. So Josh Gordon did it brilliantly for Barrow, and so did Ronan Coughlin for Fleetwood. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I think if you bring in a target man, you kind of lose that bit of maybe mobility against the ball, which would be a bit of the worry for me.
Yeah, I think it's just a different profile and different sort of fresh figure that we need, because we've got different profiles. Coughlin, he'll get into more wide areas, more left side heavy, and then I think his footwork's better than the others, and obviously I think his finishing's good. And then we've got Graydon, who sort of, he'll like to link the play. Final third quality can be a bit iffy at times, and but then he can go into the channel, he can drop deep, and he can be aerially okay. And then Keane Harrott, he can back into defenders, and he's I think probably our quickest centre forward, who just needs a run of games really to get him going to try and score a few goals. So got the perfect blend there. I just think in games this season we've been really lacking that target man, and maybe that's just because it's a Charlie Adams system, and maybe Coughlin's strength, Coughlin's lack of strength sort of showed more under Charlie Adam, and hopefully under Wild, even though we are playing more direct, we can cope without that target man.
Yeah, well, hopefully that'll prove to be the case. But a really exciting time, I think, for Fleetwood with the impact of Pete Wild, and it seems to really galvanise the club. Good to see those celebrations of Hispans back in League Two as well. Listen, Jack, it's been great to get you a brilliant insight on League Two. Always a pleasure to have you on, mate. Likewise, thanks to all our guests this evening. Thanks to you for watching at home. This has been the EFL Debate League Two podcast. Get subscribed to EFL Debate on YouTube and on Spotify. That would do us a huge favour. But in the meantime, enjoy League Two, and we'll see you again next week.